On this episode of the podcast, I have with me Doron Segal. He is the CTO of Per Diem. We're going to be talking about something interesting. He's got a great background in launching multiple startups, and we're going to be talking about how his approach has changed over each iteration of the startup in terms of how he builds the organization. Obviously, he's built a number of startups, and once you go through it a couple of times, you start hopefully coming up with a better process and a better mousetrap. And I think Doron has a couple of insights in terms of hiring early, some of the pitfalls of looking for the right talent, and I'm excited to have him on the podcast. So thank you for being on, Doron.
Thank you for having me, Amir. So a little bit about myself. My name is Doron. Grew up in Israel, moved to the Bay Area 2011, October 2012 actually. Work at Siemens and then Beats Music. We got acquired by Apple Music. So I went through the small startup with a big company and then went to OpenTable. After 2 years there, I joined to a very early stage startup called Celdron, building robotic sailboats. The name is Celdron. So my name is Doron. That was the whole thing too. But having the name drone on a sailboat was, people always think it's flying, but it's not. It's just a sailboat with two computers. I guess we need to edit that because I might be it's a robotic sailboat. And then after 5 years there, I realized it's time to build another startup. So then I built Per Diem, which during COVID, we realized there was a problem. One of the problem was that businesses needed to build subscription, and it just was impossible using existing tools like Wix and Shopify and Square. No one was able to support with a subscription. And the KPI was, let's help people to build a subscription business in under 2 minutes. So that's what we're trying to build.
Cool. Sounds like an ambitious product. You're the CTO. So just to I guess clarify, your domain, is it just technology? Do you touch product or any other departments as well?
Exactly. That's a good question. So I feel like everyone take their own CTO to a different place. Some more in the COO, some on the CPO. I guess when you start a startup, you kind of do everything. So you do write the code, you do product. I mainly product and technology, but I do think it's important for me to try sell my own product. I think every person should be in sales. At the end of the day, if you at least a co-founder or C-level executive, if you're CFO of a company, you still need to know how to sell your product and understand it and use the product if possible. I guess if we are thinking about it, it's mainly product and technology.
Okay, that makes sense. Yeah, I mean, obviously, early stage, you have to wear multiple hats. I guess, talking about the episode, you've gone through multiple startups. You have some experience in building the organization and hiring, and obviously through each permutation, there's some learnings that have gone through. So 30% of executive time spent recruiting, talent acquisition, and your involvement is a big piece of that time. So I guess when you're looking at hiring, and especially we're talking about the engineering side, as you kind of look back over the years, maybe talk to us how your approach has changed. Like, how did you approach hiring your first phase? How's it changed? Give us a little bit of insight in terms of that process and maturation.
I do. Okay, so I have a lot of opinion about the subject, and I think it's important because companies spend a lot of money on hiring. And I think one of the other things that people pay a lot of money for recruiters. They pay, 15 to 30% from the annual salary, but no one invests on retention and talent. So you already spend so much money to get this person in the door. The moment they're in the door, you're starting to count like the dollar you spent. The computer, the bottle that costs you like $1.50, and there is not a lot of on the retention side. And retention is also including like send your manager to training. And that's more in like the bigger, like more of the big companies, like, like take Beats and Apple and OpenTable. OpenTable is the public traded company, part of like Priceline. And I feel like it is very important to also invest, if not even more, on retention. I think retention will help you recruit people. It will make it even cheaper because happy people talk about their workplace. So I think it's very important too, not just invest on bringing the person. It's like a very shitty salesperson. So we're gonna do everything to just have you on board, and once you're on board, that's it. Like kind of like a very bad gym membership. You can't cancel. So that's one. The second thing, and that's something we spoke about, it's about being very adaptive to where the company is. If you have 5 users, you don't need a guy from Facebook. You don't need to spend $1 million on this person because you don't really need them. They're not where you're at. And it's actually will hurt your business, not just financially. Let's assume that you have the money, but also working with those people when you're not ready for that. And it might sound bad, but sometimes it's easier to work with more junior people because you can make more mistakes with them versus a very senior person that be like, oh my God, this guy has no idea how to run a company. And then they're just going to leave you and you'll feel bad about yourself. And then you basically you go back to where you started. So I think definitely it's really understand like what your business need and finding. So like a Hack Reactor guy who just finished his Hack Reactor can build a faster website than the guy at 15 years at Google. Again, there's a lot of people are going to say, oh, it depends. Yes, it really depends. But for 99% of the companies, you find the right talent. It's always going to be the junior ones.
Let me ask you a question about that, because that's a good observation. And I'm going to come back to your point on retention, but let's talk about hiring. And let's talk about hiring. And let's say you're a small startup, even a small team within a larger company, right? And you're building a new product, something that the company doesn't have. To a certain extent, you got to start someplace, right? Somebody has to bring the IP. Somebody has to do the legwork, wear multiple hats and whatnot. So when you say don't hire somebody, let's say from, and Google is an example, but just a large tech company, right? There's a bunch of them we could mention. In terms of the driver behind not doing that, because obviously when you look at it from the outside, you think, well, that person has seen everything, and that sounds great. But obviously there's pitfalls to that, I think you alluded to. And I think, there's a couple maybe that might stand out.
Exactly. And so also, so it comes to like, it's another point I wanted to make. A lot of people who just starting their startup, I need a technical co-founder. Great. Or they tell me I need a CTO. And it's like, no. Don't use CTO. You don't need a C-level executive technology officer. Like you don't need a C-level. You need someone who can write code. And it's okay to say, hey, I'm looking for a senior engineer. You're going to be the first engineer at the company. We most likely will scrape everything you're going to write in the next 2 years anyway. You're just going to help me to build an MVP, onboard the first 100, 200, maybe 1,000 customers. Once we raise some money, we're going to rewrite it anyway with stronger talent. That's when most companies start using, like a very shitty infrastructure. And then today moving, once they are successful and their product market fit, they are going to move to AWS and Kubernetes and adding logging and tracing and test. So that's on that. So then sometimes bringing someone to work at a big company for the past 15 years, you bring those really, really good, work ethic and processes that you don't really need. You don't need one-on-one, and you don't need sprint and retro meeting when it's like 3 people. There's no need for that. It's like as easy as like, oh guys, we need to build this feature because I have a call with this customer tomorrow. Let's just do it. And if we need, let's just fake it. One of the startups I was trying to do was called Artistify, and it was a marketplace for artists. And the way I did it, I found 3 artists, created a bunch of fake accounts, and started putting Google ads and see how much people are willing to buy an artist's work. And I realized that it's really hard because most people don't want to spend money on artists, on art in general. The whole goal was you take a picture and then someone will paint it for you. That was kind of like that was like the book for Amazon. So you take a picture and some artists will paint it for you. Some people are willing to pay, but my user acquisition was very expensive. And the second thing, I realized that artists are very hard to work with. So they told me 2 weeks. So in the website, it says 14 days, you'll get, the painting will be ready. But then when you call the artist, it's like, oh, sorry, it's going to take me like a month. And it's like, unless you can automate at least one side of your marketplace, or you have a really big supply, it's very hard to scale it. And I think that's what's happened with artists. You cannot scale it. So that's I kind of gave up on that. But it was a good learning. I did not need anyone from Facebook. I could literally get someone from Hack Reactor to build this for me with MongoDB on a Roku. Like that's all I needed. I didn't need someone who's like, oh, I'm going to do a Terraform script to build your infrastructure on AWS. That's going to take 2 months. And it was just a very simple hack to like creating a bunch of fake accounts that all linked to 2 artists. We just generate a bunch of first, last name and some profile images. And it was good just to kind of test the idea before going to investor and that's for money. And I feel like that's the mistake most people do. It's like, oh, investors don't want to invest in me. We can touch this later, but at least build something before. And again, if you're looking for the talent, figure out what exactly you need and find the person who actually can give you the right thing that you need, not more than that at the stage you're in.
So that's interesting. So obviously, as you've seen, the organizations go from the MVP to a more mature product, right? It seems like a lot of, while we're talking about engineering, it's based in science. It's very technical, analytical. When you decide to scrap that MVP and start building a more mature product, seems like a little bit more art because obviously it's going to require some investment. You have to have the funding. You have to have the right players. You might need that person who knows how to scale. How do you, I guess, from your experience, when you're looking at that stage or when you're looking at that stage for a startup you're at now, like at Per Diem, how do you envision that? When do you go, hey, it's time for us to scrap this MVP. Let's move to the, let's actually get to the product that we really need to build to scale because this is, was just done with some, gum and sticks.
Right. So yes, so I'm going to touch with the first point. I also think it's easier to hire those more junior people than the Google guy or a Facebook or any big company, but just because of like they're stuck. So they want to wait until they're vested. You need to come up with a very strong offer. They need to think about it. They're most likely more older than the junior guy. It's just so they might have other people and they need to take into account before quitting or changing their jobs. So it's always going to be harder to even get to those guys. So start with those junior and then grow. And then when do you decide to actually make the switch? I think it's actually going to be natural to you. You're starting to see a lot more users. The feature are getting a little bit more complex. You see a lot, like it's basically once you see the product market fit, it's kind of like a snowball that you push up the mountain. And once you don't need to push it and the snowball is starting to fall down, that's the moment where you can go and start hiring, raise more money and kind of go to it. I do think it's very hard to get to product market fit. And now in this market, we're starting to see a lot of companies who kind of fake their own product market fit. They just had a lot of capital and they said, oh, let's invest it in marketing and buy user. So they basically buy a $2 deal for $10. It's like, yeah, I'll do it all day long. You're going to give me $5 for $2? Sure, let's do it. So I think that's what we've seen a lot. And I've seen it with other vendor I'm using. I'm not paying for vendors to do that. I don't even know who sponsored their infrastructure.
And I guess, as you're mentioning that, when you're starting to look at, the need to hire the person that has seen scale, the person that, is coming in, is going to have ideas of what a better infrastructure is. Obviously, they're gonna want to slow things down, potentially think about things. When you're bringing that person onto your team, how do you start reconfiguring the team? Because obviously that person might be at odds at, somebody who was brought on just to, slap to something together.
Right. So I do think that, I think that the signal that's going to tell you need to hire this person when things are starting to break. Things starting to break because you have customers and they're using the system and it's okay. The moment you start feeling it's too late, I should have hired this person a long time ago, it's okay. That's when you're feeling it's good. It's the exact sentence that I think it was the LinkedIn co-founder who said, if you're not shy about your product, it's probably too late for you to launch it. So I think it's the reverse sentence of saying, if it's not starting to break, you don't need those people yet. Like, it's me, no one uses your system. That's why it's so stable. So unless you get there, I think that's the signal. And it's okay. When you feel it's too late, that's part of it. That's part of the game. Also, you're going to start seeing traction. So it might be interesting to basically say, wow, I'm going to be owning all of that. And that's your card. That's why, like, wow, I want to do that. This guy going to let me like rebuild this all and like scale these things. That's what I want. And it's just going to be me and not the other 500 people that I work with, or the whole group. So, and people who are excited about this thing, those are the one you want to hire, because you don't want to hire the guys like, oh, it's just going to be me. Oh man, because it's not those. It's those guys who probably went to those big company because it's 9 to 5. They'll get paid pretty good, and they won't do much. So and so you want the guy who actually excited. This very exciting for him. And I think the way to approach it, I think that's basically where it comes to, right? You're going to go talk to investor, they're going to see your traction, and they're going to ask, what's your plan? It's like, oh, I'm already talking with those guys. And I think the way to do is basically, I found Hacker News pretty useful. And that's where you can start saying, hey, I'm looking for a CTO or an architect. And I would say, be cheap about title, but be generous for equity. Because once you hire someone as a CTO, you can't hire another CTO. So make sure, like, hey, you're an engineering manager at your current company, great, come be a director and start there. And then worst case scenario, landing at a VP, but there might not be the best person to be a VP. So I think that's what I would say. Like, don't every time just say, oh, we're looking for a CTO. Because I don't even know, because I'm not the CTO. A 20 people company does not need a C-level executive. There's not like board meeting every week. It's like, it's us trying to get to $1 million in revenue. Like, that's basically what it is. It's people operating a website at the moment or an app. So I just want to, let's realize where we are, and like, it's all good to read a book and say, okay, this CTO did A, B, and C. But again, this CEO managing 15,000 people company versus you managing 5 or 10 or 20, the challenges are different. So you don't need to build, your schedule doesn't look anything like them, or your problem, or your day to day. So
yeah, I guess that kind of like you mentioned, obviously hiring the right person at the right stage at the right time. I think that's always tricky. And you mentioned, obviously, initially, companies don't spend enough money on retention. This is obviously an ongoing evolution for the company as it's growing, as it's scaling. You bring different people in. Sometimes it's tricky because that first person, let's say you're bringing in and you're expecting them to come in and help with some of the scaling to seem excited. There's a lot of work unless that person's had that experience before within that size company. Coming from a large company to small company is one thing startups always are worried about, because you lose a lot of the support structure just all around you. That's you wear multiple hats, and obviously retention, that's an expensive hire. You brought in a big dollar, a lot of equity and all that stuff. When you're looking at retention tactics for somebody, like say one of your initial engineers you hired that are coming to help you scale at that point, what can a company do to help with that retention?
Yeah, so basically it comes to hiring an HR person, someone who basically get the employees' feedback and act on that. Don't get defensive, really understand where they come from. I think I'm good at getting feedback, and the older I'm getting better at that too. Because I always think like, oh, I see it from their shoes too. So I think that was really helpful. So really understand where they're coming from, what's drive them. Every person drives by different things. Some people really like that, they have the flexibility. Some employees are not good with flexibility. When you tell them like, oh, you can work from wherever, whenever, and they don't have the daily meeting with you of like the stand up and putting goals and like, just like, hey, I need this for tomorrow and I need this in 2 days. They're working better. They'll just do that. Some people, if you don't give them this well-structured plan, they just don't get to anything. So it's really understanding and knowing your team. So I think the HR side is about kind of the fulfillment side and make sure they have like what's in for me. And then you kind of get like both sides. You kind of get the dad and the mom in a way. The softer side come usually from the HR side who listen to you, but think that you don't feel as comfortable to talk with your direct manager. Because sometimes in like big company, your interests are they're not the same. Because at the end of the day, your manager want to get promoted. So I haven't seen a manager that's ask basically, "Oh, I think he should be my manager." Like probably no one said that. And I think, how do you make sure that you build an organization that is that healthy? It's probably impossible, and it's okay. But that's where HR can come and suggest to the CTO or to any other of the manager, "Hey, I think this person can grow in a different team, or I think he's a really good manager material. So maybe we can try to see how he's act." And it's a risk that you're taking sometimes when you take, but I think you need sometimes this second opinion. That's why, like in my old company, I used to do basically like a second degree, I guess, one-on-ones, like where I go to some of the engineers who work under my managers, to the manager I'm managing. So yeah.
Yeah, I mean, I think it's. I think those are some really good points. I think as I was listening to you, even if you're a small startup, you're mid-stage startup, I think that feedback loop is super important for the employee experience, the retention, and especially if you're really small, like you said, somebody can share the title initially. I think that's really good insight, because that's where if somebody isn't responsible for it, it could slip in between the cracks, and it's hard. So I think very, very good advice. Man, I appreciate you coming on. Thank you for sharing. I think everything's been very insightful. I think people will definitely appreciate the episode. I'd like to always ask a guest if there's a question or topic they would like a future guest to address or speak about. Is there anything that you, off the top of your mind, would love for someone to either a single question or topic to address later?
Yeah, I guess this is, I think, something that every CTO should think about, and it's build versus buy. And that's something I think it comes to any director, VP, and I think any engineer at the end of the day, really. It's like, do you buy it or do you build it? Do I build a messaging service or just buy something off the shelf? So that's, I think, could be a good thing to think about, because at the end of the day, we are using open source packages, but then we have the maintenance. So sometimes you can just go and buy it for $200 a month. Is it, the same way we don't build our own data center, we use AWS. So we buy versus build it ourselves. So, a lot of the time you see people are trying to build it. And so, yeah, that's, I think it's
no, it's a good one. I'm definitely a great topic. I think that'd be one to find someone to talk to that. I think it'd be great, or maybe even a panel discussion. So I think that's a good one. And if someone wants to reach out to you to talk about anything you mentioned on the podcast, what's a good way? Social media, email, LinkedIn, Twitter.
Yeah,
what's a good way
LinkedIn, Twitter. You can always email me at Doron, DORON @triperdiem.com.
Okay. All right. Well, we will include some of those links in there. Doron, thank you for being on the podcast. I appreciate your time.
Awesome. Thank you.
Awesome. So that's it for this episode. We'll be back again. Different guest, different topic. If you did find the podcast useful, please share. That's how it's been growing. And if somebody would like to talk about the build versus buy and how engineers, whether you're CTO or not, VP or any engineer really deals with that process, I'd love to have you on. Or if you know someone that can address that topic, let me know. It'd be great to have them on. That's it for this week. Back again. Thank you and goodbye.